Hi, this is Tom Needham, and you're listening to the Sounds of Film. And I'm very excited to have on the program again Sacha Jenkins. He's a New York based writer, filmmaker, and musician who came of age during hip hop's golden era. Some of his film credits, among many other things that he's done in his life, include movies like Everything's Gonna Be All White, Bitching the Sound and Fury of Rick James, and his last critically acclaimed documentary, Louis Armstrong's Black and Blues. His latest film, though, is All Up in the Biz. It's the definitive story of the late, great rapper Biz Markie, who's best known for his mega hit, Just a Friend. Some crowned him the clown prince of hip hop. Markie was a beatbox whiz who was known for his comical rhymes. He's also a native of Long Island, which is of particular interest to many of our listeners. So many people that he helped in his career are featured in this film, including Rakim and Big Daddy Kane. The documentary features never before seen footage, animation, puppet reenactments, and interviews with people like Fat Joe, Eric Sermon, Nick Cannon, and Tracy Morgan, among many others. We're very lucky to have Sacha on the show again. Thanks for coming on The Sounds of Film.
Happy to be here.
Oh man, what a terrific movie. How did you come up with this idea for the movie? I heard something that you had spoken to him about doing this before he passed away. Is that correct?
Yeah, a friend of mine who's from Long Island who knew him brought him to my office because he said was interested in me doing a doc, and we had a great conversation. And I put together a deck, something that sort of tells what the film is about, so you can shop it around and see if you can get any takers. And there were no takers. It wasn't until after he passed away, not because he passed away did it get made, but Mass Appeal has a program with Showtime called Hip Hop 50, where Mass Appeal was producing lots of hip hop films to coincide with the 50th anniversary, which is this year. And so I gave Showtime a pitch for Biz Markie, and they thought it was a good fit, and so here we are.
Well, it's obviously a good fit, and this movie was so entertaining. And one of the things that I particularly enjoyed about it is that you do a really great job talking about hip hop on Long Island. Now, I always think of Long Island as including Queens and Brooklyn, but you don't get to see in movies too often things about Suffolk County. Can you tell us a little bit about what you learned about Biz's life on Long Island that you feature in the film?
Well, he was originally from Harlem and then wound up living under a bridge somewhere in Long Island, and then wound up at a foster family in Long Island where he had a taste of suburban life and had love for a really nice family and brothers and sisters. And while he had that foundation there, he wound up, making friends and becoming a bit of a character who really loved hip hop. So he basically was a vagabond who traveled all around Long Island, trying to make a name for himself in the world of hip hop, and then eventually, as a vagabond, he would travel, the four boroughs. Maybe he went to Staten Island, but he was traveling all over the place. Before there was the internet, before there were cell phones, this guy was just everywhere. Everyone knew him.
That's one of the things that really comes through in this movie is what a social person he was. It's amazing the fondness that a lot of people have talking about him, but the story is incredible. The way you said that he goes around from place to place, and not everyone can do that. It seems like it was a real key to his success, wasn't it?
I mean, it's networking, it's before Facebook or whatever social media. He's like the human internet, he's just connecting with so many people, and his philosophy was very simple. The more friends I made, the more likely people might buy my record when I put it out. So, very simple formula, but it worked.
Well, it's funny. Two people that were very inspired by him, but are so different musically and lyrically than Biz Markie are Rakim and Big Daddy Kane. They're both inductees of the Long Island Music and Entertainment Hall of Fame. It's really striking how much respect they have for him. Can you talk to our listeners a little bit about what he meant to them?
Well, he was the personal cheerleader for both of them. He sort of saw the talent that they had before anyone else and really encouraged them. And they both say that, like, although they were trying to do their thing, they didn't have the level of aspiration that Biz had, the level of drive that he had. Really, he put a battery in their backs and really charged them up to want to take a chance. I mean, Rakim tells the story of a battle in Harlem that Biz was trying to get him to go to. And, Rakim, he says, like, I'm not going to Harlem. Like, I'm from Long Island, and people are going to think I'm corny, right? But Biz was like, come on, man, you can do it. And so he's like, somehow I decided to get on the train and go to the battle. And although I didn't win, I had that experience, and people told me when I walked off stage, like, yeah, you got something, keep going. So both of those guys have stories about how business support really pushed them to really want to make it.
Now, do you have a personal story about when you first heard his music?
I mean, Nobody Beats the Biz is the song that I remember from my childhood that was, I was a big Steve Miller Band fan. Back then, like, hip-hop sampled everything, and people who were into hip-hop were into all kinds of music because there wasn't that much hip-hop out there, So I had fond memories of the Steve Miller Band song Fly Like an Eagle from when I was way younger, and the way Marley put it together in that track, just, mixing it with business rhymes, I just have fond memories of that song and that time of my life where I'm just, Friday night listening to Marley Marlo's mix show, 16, 15, like just, listening to these guys who were like celebrities. Like, you always knew someone who knew someone who knew the rapper. And I'd grown up with a couple of rappers myself, but you're a kid and this guy's not that much older than you and he's a star. So, like, it's like reaching for the stars, thinking about Biz Markie or Marley Marl, all of these people who were contemporaries at that time. And they were stars that were reachable. You could run into Biz at the mall or something,
It's incredible. You mentioned that it's the 50th anniversary. And, I mean, you've been doing all kinds of work related to hip hop for many, many years. And as you mentioned earlier, when Biz approached you about doing the documentary, there originally was no interest. And now it seems like everywhere you look, there's something about hip hop with the 50th anniversary going on. And there's so much interest in Biz. Did you ever expect it to get to this point where people would start to, just in the mainstream, I mean, I know it's been like the top selling music for quite a long time, but it seems to be getting a different kind of mass appeal, no pun intended, appreciation now. That's incredible.
Well, I mean, rock and roll is obviously older than 50 years. And when rock and roll turned 50, there wasn't the same level of hubbub around it. And I think it's because hip-hop is so plugged into marketing and money and cash. I mean, hip-hop makes so much money. And so you've got lots of people who will invest in something that celebrates it because it makes so much money. So no, I'm not totally surprised, but it's cool to see. But I predict that after this, there's going to be a crash, and there's not going to be that much interest from the mainstream in hip hop. I think the mainstream is going to take a break from hip hop after this 50 years of partying.
I hope that's not the case. One of the things that you do that I think is so important is that you try to educate everybody in an entertaining way about the history. When you were making this film, did you gain a greater sense of the importance of Biz Markie's music in terms of the history of hip hop?
Well, more so, I gained an understanding of how he was the essence of hip. He was the living manifestation of hip hop because he touched every single corner of the culture, from snaps, like making fun of folks, which is a part of the culture that no one talks about in relation to hip hop, to DJing, to rhyming, to fashion. I mean, to collecting. Believe it or not, like collecting, the world of collecting today. I mean, he would be very on time because this is all people do now is collect stuff. Yeah. He was doing that a long time ago. So sampling, the case that he was involved with helped sort of change or establish how sampling worked, which in turn affected how hip hop was made. I mean, there's so many things that these great legendary rappers that he intersects with. I mean, he's touched everything in hip hop, and so the opportunity to make a film about someone like he's the only person who can do that. He's the only person who's done that, touched so many facets of the culture at such a high level and have an influence. I don't think anyone has as much influence as him, and no one's thinking about the influence he had. But I think when you see the film, you'll understand the influence he had.
I so agree. You mentioned the copyright suit. If you can kind of just share for our audience what happened with that suit. And I'm kind of curious also your opinion. I really miss the early days of hip hop and the sampling that was done by Biz Markie and the Beastie Boys and Public Enemy and Tribe and all these different artists. It was such a creative period, and now because of the lawsuits, so many people can't do what they used to. And I'm curious what your thoughts are about the end result of that lawsuit, not just with Biz, but with everyone, really.
Well, in the beginning, you're sampling and you're not selling that many records, and it's just, it's a DJ culture thing. It's a part of the culture. It's part of hip hop culture. The artists who you're sampling aren't really thinking about you. They don't even know that this is going on. But once all of a sudden hip hop artists become popular and those records that you make with someone else's music become big, I mean, why wouldn't they want in? Why wouldn't an artist want to be compensated for their art? So, Biz was around at a time where, you didn't pay for samples because no one knew anything about it. No one was looking for money. Like, it was small mom and pop sort of local radio and people making cassettes for friends. No one really thought much of it. But because of the success of hip hop, artists who were being sampled, they wanted to get paid, and that's exactly what happened with Gilbert O'Sullivan, who had a song that Biz Markie sampled, a song from like 1972, and he really liked it, and he made his own song based on it, and I think they tried to clear the sample, but Gilbert O'Sullivan wanted what at the time his label thought was a lot of money, so they asked for it. They didn't give him what he wanted, so then they went and put the song out anyway. So, of course, Gilbert O'Sullivan's going to be pissed off because you can't just, I told you what I wanted and you just did it anyway. So that just helped to establish the idea of you can sample, it's cool, but you need permission and you need to pay people. And I think it's fair. I mean, if you're selling X amount of records and your song is based on another song, like, that initial artist should get paid, should be compensated. So this case with Gilbert O'Sullivan getting pissed at him and them going to court, I believe you had to pay a pretty penny. But from there, it's just established the rules of sampling, which you got to have rules for everything. And so finally, hip hop sampling producers had rules to follow.
Yeah, I mean, I agree it is fair. I just hear, though, from so many artists that it's just too expensive now or too impossible. And I don't know how the math works, but it would seem like, if there is such an opportunity to make money, that there should be some kind of formula where people can do it and everyone gets paid. But I'm hearing from so many artists that they just don't even, it prevents some people from making the music that they want to right from the start because they need so much money up front. Is that true? You're more knowledgeable about this than I am.
Well, it seems like kids today who are producers will either replay stuff or, find creative ways to work around it. So I just think it forces you to be more creative.
Yeah.
So, and the hip hop that we might have come up on was sample heavy, and there's always phases of samples. Like for a time it was funk, for a time it was jazz, for a time it was rock and roll.
Yeah.
So producers go through sounds and phases based on pre-existing music, but I think now it's wide open in terms of all the technology. I mean, there's AI, there's all kinds of crazy things now that you can incorporate into your music. So
it is pretty amazing. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think it just makes people have to be more creative.
Yeah. Well, talking about creativity, one of the things that's really special about this movie is the creativity that you demonstrated by using puppetry and animation. You don't see that in every documentary. Tell us a little bit about some of the choices you made here.
Well, the animation is a guy named Hector Arias, who I use him in every film I ever make because he's a brilliant genius, and his animations are really special. I mean, there's the Dougie first telling the story of when he first beatboxed, and so Dougie's walking down the street, and then there's a huge billboard that's moving along with him, and you just see his mouth making these sounds. I mean, that's just brilliant. So I benefit from Heck's brilliance, and then the puppet. I mean, Biz Markie is dead, right? But a big important part of his story was the year and change that he was in the hospital, slowly dying during COVID, but fighting to stay alive. And the only person who really got to see him during that period was his wife. So I wanted to sort of recreate that relationship on camera in a way that felt very Biz. And when you think Biz, you think puppets, you think toys. And I just thought it would be a great way to bring him back to life, so to speak.
Well, it really worked well. Any hesitancy doing that, or did you just know from the beginning this is going to work?
I go with the voices in my head, and the voices in my head told me to do that. And they haven't failed me yet. I'm sure they'll tell me to do something that I won't be happy with, but I was happy that I listened to the voices in my head this time.
Yeah. I think like if it was anyone else, it would have been maybe a little strange, but somehow because it was Biz Markie, it seemed perfect. Like it just blended with everything else, and in some ways, like mirrored what's going on in his music and the stuff that he did in his real career outside of music, like with TV shows and movies and all that kind of stuff.
I agree. There are people out there who aren't a fan of the puppet, and that's fine. That was an artistic choice I made as a filmmaker, and I took the chance. And you always hope people will like when you take a chance, and I took a chance.
Yeah. One of the things I want to go back to, we were just talking about the copyright stuff. It's something that everyone has to deal with now in the music industry and hip hop. But in the film, after that lawsuit, at least the way it was portrayed in the movie, Biz kind of made like a really big decision at that point and just said, you know what, I'm not going to make music. I'm just going to DJ, because he started having success, or he decided that he could be a successful DJ and make a living. That was pretty dramatic to just give up on making the music and DJ instead.
Well, that was a great decision. He wound up becoming one of the most sought after, well-paid DJs in the world, and so he maintained a career and travel and having a name for himself, and going back to the essence of hip hop once again, which it all starts with the DJ. So it just, again, another example of how he was the essence of hip hop.
Did he have any? Did you learn of him? I mean, obviously that was a smart decision in terms of his career. But was there any burning desire to make more music that you think maybe like if he had lived longer, he would be going back and making new music?
Yeah, I'm sure. But the way things are changing, it's almost like the music business has gone back to the original formula, which is not albums but singles. Put out some singles. So I could have seen him putting out some party records, or songs where that are very upbeat, that you just hear his voice saying something very repetitively, and that you would hear in a club or something like that, because he's a DJ. I'm sure, but I think hip hop in many ways is, I don't want to say it's a young man's sport, but it has a shelf life. And he was smart enough to be able, and malleable enough to be able to adjust and adapt. So his hip hop shelf life was longer than most, but there's a shelf life nonetheless. And some people, when they get to a certain age, they don't feel comfortable rapping. I don't know if that's the case with Biz, but he did more than enough on the mic that if he wanted to retire rapping at that point, it's totally fine.
Can you explain a little bit more about how you think that some hip hop artists, when they reach a certain age, don't feel comfortable rapping anymore? What do you mean?
Well, I think a big part of rap has always been reference points, right? So if you're 21 years old, there are certain cartoons and pop culture references that you know well, that other people your age will know well. But if you're like a 58-year-old rapper, your reference points most likely aren't the same as the younger folks. And because we live in a society that's extremely ageist and puts a shelf life on everything, when you're older and you don't know the reference points, people who listen to hip hop can't relate because they're just not familiar with what you're referencing. So some artists, when they get to a certain age, they're uncomfortable rapping. But then you have artists like Nas, who's like the Peter Pan of this. Like, he can still put out albums that are contemporary and that people like. And I think that's because he listens. He listens to what's going on, and he doesn't really corrupt what it is that he does. He has a formula. People know what to expect from him. But because he's smart enough to really understand how language changes and how reference points change, he's able to adapt. Not many people have that skill.
That's really fascinating. I think you might be right. Biz was one of the people who could, as we said earlier, go into other areas of entertainment, be it TV, movies, other things. Why do you think he was able to do that while others can't?
Because he didn't take himself seriously, but at the same time, he was serious about not taking himself seriously. And I think that makes people feel comfortable because he's comfortable with himself. He's comfortable with being a little weird or people thinking that he's weird. And that's disarming. You know, he was a very curious person and fun to talk to. So there's always a fun, weird character that a guy like Biz can play and bring a level of authenticity to the role. So he was a great character for me to utilize on their canvas.
I have no idea whether you tried or not, or if you had any opinions about it, but I noticed that the Beastie Boys were not in the documentary.
How did I know that was coming? How did I know that? Well, I tried. I tried. Our schedules just didn't sync up. But in many ways, honestly, he had a phase and a period with them, and they were great friends. But this film is interesting because you remember him as a black artist with a black fan base who really appreciate him for being black. As crazy as raw as that sounds, I think that the Biz Markie period with the Beastie Boys was cool, and those guys loved him and didn't think he was a joke. But I think many of the Beastie fans kind of saw him as a mascot. You know, this funny guy who and he is kind of like a mascot. He is kind of a funny guy, but I feel like in the black world, Biz stands out as a marquee artist, not sort of, Mike D's friend who's kind of funny and goofy. I think he stands on his own 2 feet in the black world of hip hop. Not that Beastie Boys are not in the world of hip hop, they are, but I just feel like, sorry, loud New York City. I just feel like, you remember him as a black artist with black fans and black people remembering him now. Again, I would have loved to have Adam and Mike. It just didn't work out. By the time they're ready to do it, my deadline was over.
Okay, so
they know I tried.
Yeah. So I just wanted to be clear, though. You did try to, and it's not like you purposely left them out because you thought they were somehow disrespectful in their use of him or anything like that.
No. They were good friends.
Yeah, I thought so, but yeah.
I'm just saying that their fans, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, kind of saw him as like a sidekick and a mascot. I don't know that they're really familiar with his career.
Yeah.
That the more core hip hop fans were into.
Right.
So.
No, that's a good point.
But again, Mike and Adam are friends. They're cool. They're just busy, so it didn't work out. But got Hurricane though. Hurricane comes from that camp.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So.
I know we don't have too much more time, but you've been making so many movies, and you made films recently about Rick James and Louis Armstrong, and I was wondering, can you tie together all these different figures, as well as some others that you've noticed, like some characteristics in the people that you feature in your movies that, somehow makes them special?
Well, what I realized is, hip hop is supposedly having a 50th anniversary, and I think that's cool. And I hope everyone from the old school or whatever school you're in is making money from it, because hip hop, obviously keeps lights on and people deserve to be paid for their art. But bringing it to your question, I feel like hip hop is obviously way older. I feel like Louis Armstrong is hip hop. I feel like Rick James is hip hop. I feel because the music they make is rooted in the Black experience in America and Black experience reacting to and reflecting their experience, right? I mean, Louis Armstrong caught a gun charge at 13. RZA's mother ran numbers for the mob. So did Rick James's mom. It's the same people, same. Maybe the slang changes slightly, the style of dress changes slightly, but it's all in how we represent ourselves, how we present ourselves. That's what hip hop is. That's what jazz is. That's what blues is. So, in my opinion, hip hop is way older than 50. And Rick James, Louis Armstrong, RZA, Biz Markie, they're all in the same school, if you ask me.
And now that this film is out there in the world, it's playing on Showtime. What's the number one thing that you hope audiences take away in terms of what they will learn about Biz Markie?
Sorry, say that again.
What's the number one thing that you hope audiences will take away from watching your movie about Biz?
That he knew who he was. I think people take lifetimes to have an understanding of who they are and how they feel about themselves. But I think at a young age, the reason why he was successful was because at a young age, he knew who he was and he stuck to the script. He stuck to the formula, and he knew he was odd. He knew he was different, and he used that as a strength to separate himself from everyone else. And he knew that one of the core principles of hip hop is to be original, not to be a copycat. And he was a true original. And so I think hopefully people will walk away understanding how original he was and why that set him apart and why that's made him an icon.
Well, I appreciate that you made this film because it is an important story. Do you think there'll ever be like a dramatic bio film made in Hollywood?
I keep hearing that. I hope so. So maybe someone will give me a call and I can direct it. But yeah, it seems like people are really reacting to his story in the film, and maybe someone in Hollywood would want to pony up and make that film. I'm available for it if it's possible.
Well, I think you're the guy to do it. Sacha, I want to thank you so much for coming on the program, and I want to recommend to all of our listeners that you check out All Up in the Biz about Biz Markie. It's on Showtime, and it's really just a fun, great movie. Thank you so much again.
Thanks for having me.